And joining us here in studio, Mr. Dan Perry, international affairs analyst. Mr. Perry, the Houthi havoc and the American softness, how should I put it?
Well, America's not eager for more wars in the Middle East, so they have this
but there is a war in the Middle East.
They have a reluctance to get too involved, and there's a point where if a bully threatens you and swings at you, at some point you have to swing back, and when dealing with these thugs, you have to carry a big stick. Clearly, the Biden administration would prefer to not be dragged into all-out conflict with Yemen. And there's also a notion, there's a theory, that the Houthis really can't be subdued because Saudi Arabia and the UAE tried for about 7 years and basically failed. And they tried with U.S. support and U.S. aircraft and didn't succeed. And the Houthis are still there. But Yemen paid a terrible price. 400,000 people died in Yemen during that time mostly. And from not just from warfare, that was about a third or so, but from cholera that resulted and from torture, famine, and hunger. Just terrible. They don't care. This is the thing. We have two phenomena here. One, Iran clearly wants to sow chaos. I don't think they're the bigger superpower than the U.S., but they want to create such chaos in the Middle East that others just sort of run away because it's too annoying, basically, to deal with it. And it seems like in one way or another, the chaos will continue. It's like the whack-a-mole game in the U.S. If you whack it here, it comes up there.
You want to get out, but the Middle East pulls you back in.
Exactly, like The Godfather. But the weird thing is there's another phenomenon, which is in the service of Iran, but also partly independently. You have militias sprouting out all over that basically abdicate a major part of human nature and of governance, which is to at least feel some responsibility for the populations under your control or under your boot. As I hate to say it, but like even the Nazis probably run happy about the destruction of Dresden and the damage to Hamburg. I have to think they were. And the opposite is true here. I think if Israel had not moved in with such crushing force on Gaza, serving their purpose in a way, then Hamas would have been disappointed. And the world doesn't seem to understand that this is the paradigm that you're dealing with here. So
the lack of devastation would have been devastating.
In a way. No, I don't think the Houthis actually seek it quite in the way that Hamas does. But they don't seem to mind it. And, the several airstrikes that came too little too late, 2 months after the Houthis began to upend a third or an eighth of world trade that goes up the Red Sea to the Suez Canal, a few airstrikes, and the Houthis react to it by saying this has not degraded our capabilities. That statement alone should have invited a tenfold attack. Now, Israel is and like other countries, is learning that to totally dislodge a militia is very difficult and very costly, very ugly. But to get a militia to stop trying to poke a much bigger bear in the eye is not impossible. In the previous rounds, when Israel's goal was to subdue Hamas and not eliminate it from controlling Gaza, that goal was achievable. And for sure, the same thing is achievable with the Houthis. I'm quite confident that a big enough stick would get them to cease and desist, unless Iran wanted to get directly involved. And I fear that if this mischief from Iran goes much further, they'll find themselves in some way directly embroiled. And I don't invite or welcome that. I don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, the more you ignore the problem, the bigger it gets to an extent. Let's go back to our problems because after Bernie Sanders' bid to condition aid to Israel was voted down in the Senate, now Chuck Schumer is saying that, well, you know what, we might need to consider just that.
Yeah, and Schumer's not progressive. He's a regular old-school Democratic liberal, and he tends to be aligned with President Biden. Now, Biden wouldn't say those words, but I think it does reflect the frustration, if not the fury, of the Biden administration at the Netanyahu government's refusal to discuss a day after. Now, you could argue
it's not the war that bugs them as much as the
well, all this destruction in Gaza is in aid of what? And the Army feels the same, by the way. In recent days, the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Defense Minister, who's not just in the coalition, but from Netanyahu's Likud, have both said in different ways, we need an endgame discussion. The Biden administration would like an endgame that gives the Palestinians a political horizon that somehow involves a rejuvenated PA in what is to come after Hamas in Gaza. Netanyahu refuses to discuss it because his hard-right rivals would be displeased, and he feels that would endanger him politically. But this is endangering the strategy of the war, because you cannot establish your route if you don't know the destination.
Yeah. Well, because policy and politics are so profoundly intertwined, it seems that Netanyahu is at least trying or want to appear as trying to change, to reshuffle his cabinet, suggesting the centrist Yair Lapid and Victor Lieberman parties to join instead of the right-wingers, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir. It's a bit inside baseball, and yet important if we're talking about the survivability of this cabinet.
He's proposing this on a condition that they accept and give him a guarantee of a long-term survival. I think it was a year. And I think he believes, as he probably should, that they would stick to this agreement, which he himself, of course, would not if the shoe was on the other foot. I think viewers should know that Israel does not have a presidential system where you have a term in office and no matter your failure, you stick it out and then eventually are punished at the polls. In Israel's parliamentary system, as in every parliamentary system, a collapse of strategy and tactics and execution is cataclysmic, as what happened on October 7th generally leads to the fall of the government. And indeed, we see 75 to 80% of the people clamoring for Netanyahu to step down. The opposition will not accept his generous invitation because they know that as soon as the war can be said to have either finished or plateaued, then they will have a very strong case for bringing down a government. In the Knesset, there are various machinations they can deploy to bring that about, but public opinion is demanding it in Israel, so they're not going to give Netanyahu a ladder, I don't think.
And yet it's hard to imagine that amidst all this turmoil, from north, from south, from east, from everywhere, we'll have elections.
It is indeed hard to imagine, but not unprecedented. There were elections in the U.S. in the middle of World War II. Israel went to elections when troops, when the discussion, the post-war discussion with Egypt was still underway in 73.
Ballot boxes being set up in Gaza, that will be a novelty.
I'm not saying it would be simple, because the fighting here is still going on, and of course, both sides might be suspect of doing things to affect that election. So it would be ugly, yes, but it may be necessary nonetheless.
All right. To be continued, Mr. Dan Perry, thank you very much.